I just want to say, if my voice suddenly changes halfway through this video, I had coronavirus and my voice was completely buggered. So after part 2, I had to use a different room and I was still recovering, but I'll get there. Nostalgia is a very powerful thing, especially during this current boom of remasters and remakes. We are seeing franchises get a second lease of life, and we're seeing games from the 90s and early 2000s become more beautiful and relevant than they've ever been before. You may love this, and you may hate this. You cannot deny that it was built and feeding on everybody's pure nostalgia, and the nostalgia for the fans for every successful classic that is remade. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. If you grew up during the early 2000s like me, you saw games come and go and the industry experiment and try every type of genre and gameplay style they could. I believe I was born during the greatest time in modern gaming history, a wild west of three-dimensional storytelling. For every Final Fantasy VII, there was a Tomb Raider. For every giant sandbox of GTA 3, there was a Shadow of a Colossus. Every Resident Evil 4, there was a Silent Hill 2. The industry was in its prime of discovery and innovation, and with that innovation came imitation. Gaming was learning and growing from each other's successes, and one of the most famous animated families in the world was willing to take advantage of this. The Simpsons need no introduction. Going strong for well over 30 years, The Simpsons single-handedly reinvented that common perception of the animated television show, and has gone on to be a key inspiration for the likes of Family Guy, King of the Hill, Bob's Burgers, Rick and Morty, and almost every single animated TV show you could imagine. Simpsons probably had a hand in its inspiration. The Simpsons as a show was more than just a light-hearted family sitcom. It was an entire empire and was taking the world by storm, and it wasn't prepared to just stop at a TV show, and they wanted to change that perception too of gaming during the arcade boom of the early 90s. The Simpsons arcade game released to the world in 1991, a side-scrolling beat-em-up inspired by the likes of Double Dragon and Final Fight. It actually became one of the top-selling cabinets of the year, falling respectfully behind second place to Capcom's Street Fighter 2. Being a huge hit both commercially and critically, The Simpsons now had its feet deep in the gaming industry, and wasn't just going to stop at an arcade cabinet. But The Simpsons games as a whole never intended to lead the way for gaming, but instead lean on others and other inspirations to showcase the best of what gaming had to offer through the lens of this beloved animated family. So enter the Simpsons games of the early 2000s, my childhood. During this period we saw the game-changing successes of the likes of wrestling games like SmackDown, Crazy Taxi made a huge console arcade splash for SAGA, GTA 3 changed how worlds should be explored in the industry, and of course that timeless fast-paced brilliance of Pro Skater, leaving gaming as a whole on top of entertainment history. As I said before, with this much innovation comes imitation, and The Simpsons had to be the one to do it. We got Simpsons Wrestling, Simpsons Road Rage, Simpsons Skateboarding, and Simpsons vs Resident Evil. Oh, that one wasn't real? But the most impactful and remembered was of course Simpsons Hit and Run. Hit and Run for many growing up when I did became a family friendly alternative to the GTA franchise with a Banjo and Kazooie collectathon spin on top of it. With its successful and cultural impact, Hit and Run had surely been the beginning of something special for gaming with The Simpsons. But we heard nothing for 4 years, until the release of the Simpsons movie in 2007. To build up hype for this movie, EA of course spent all their time and focus into the next Simpsons adventure. A story that touches on imitation of gaming and that forgotten preservation of the art form that is the game industry.
Cowabunga!
The Simpsons Game 2007 is an interesting little game that uses its characters and popularity to take a shot at big brand names like EA, Nintendo, SAGA for the way that they use their fan bases for gain and leave behind the art of the past in the dust. Developed by Visceral Games of Dead Space and Godfather fame, The Simpsons game opens with the family doing what they do best in the show, getting up to shenanigans and making references to the most popular gags of the past, feeding and focusing on the nostalgia of the golden era of The Simpsons, but with a twist to them.
Superpowers, huh? Well, that's cool, I guess. I was gonna go shoot bats while reading swimsuit magazines in this cave. Wanna come with?
Now, using this nostalgia, Now, using this nostalgia and non-connecting plot lines allows for this game to live in its own little bubble and reality, enabling the players to be introduced to this new world and try to understand the expectations for the game early on. But now we're going to quickly throw a wrench right into that mix and separate this game from its previous incarnations. This right here is the Simpsons Gaming Guide, and Bart is about to learn that his reality isn't what he thought it was, and isn't what he believes it is.
This is so weird. The only Simpsons game I can think of is the one where we all pretend Dad isn't an alcoholic. What could it be?
The Simpsons game turns the Simpsons gaming scene on its head by allowing it to be a fully self-aware experience, focusing on parody and satire of the gaming landscape of the early 2000s. During the first act, we see how different all the family members play. All members play very similar by staying focused on that collection platform elements that we saw in Hit and Run, but a bigger focus on simple combos and traversal. Each family member though has a special set of skills, being a quick nod to successful games of the past. Homer focuses on transformations with huge inspirations from the likes of cameo elements of Power. Bart uses his Bartman abilities, allowing him to climb and grapple around the map, akin to the likes of Tomb Raider. Lisa takes inspirations from God Sims from the likes of Black and White, and of course Marge uses her Mega Mum's powers to create mobs with gameplay that's akin to the likes of Pikmin. The Simpsons game uses its gameplay to make homage and references to the games that inspired it, and reflected on the imitation of Simpsons games in the past. In the first hour of gameplay, we get a reference to the likes of Frogger as you must cross a lake, Space Invaders as you stop aliens from getting too close, and of course Shadow of the Colossus as you search for a weak point and climb over Lard Lad. And there are so many other gaming icons here that we get to see during this self-contained journey. The theme of remembering the past is ever present in the first act as Bart and Lisa accidentally get transported into the game's engine, where we see tired Marios and Sonic types constantly keeping the machine running with no recognition of who they once were and only left to be the literal heart of the machine itself. While the Madden sport game likes and never-ending adaptation of fighting game icons like Ryu drown them out and constantly force Bart and Lisa away. Of course here this isn't just a matter of Mario and Sonic, it's making a general reference to how games use their inspirations and tire them out in every regard. It's almost making commentary on how this almost held back most previous Simpsons games from feeling truly special because they use their imitation to the point of fault in some regards. Something I really appreciate about the storytelling of the Simpsons game is at this point we see the aliens finally invade Springfield. This is interesting because I almost see it like the game's reaction to Bart and Lisa discovering its secrets. By the game showing up with the aliens and almost throwing every reference under the sun in our face, it allows for the player and the world to feel way more distracting and allows them to not uncover something way more darker.
This must be the level boss for this part of the game.
The boss! Quick, everyone look busy!
When the aliens invade, it truly ups the ante, and finally showing us how the family are growing keen to their new powers and the gameplay mechanics. The invasion here is used as a further excuse to include many references to the Treehouse of Horror classics, Evil Dolphins, Living Lard Lads, Evil Krusty the Clown dolls, and of course Sideshow Bob stepping on rakes. The placement of this invasion as a whole shows the growth of the game fighting back against Lisa and Bart. It's like the devs or the game itself is becoming more aware that we can see what it's doing under the hood. The Simpsons must now come together and put a stop to this invasion, shutting down as many references as possible, but in doing this also leads the aliens back to their home, leaving them with nowhere to run. While in a self-aware panic, Bart remembers that he is also in a video game and could use the computer to look at cheat codes or a way to get out of this situation. But of course, in Homer's stupidity, he tries to use the disc tray as a cup holder, then they all get sucked back into that game engine and learn an even darker truth.
are in the game engine. If our life is a video game, this is the factory where it was made.
The Simpsons are transported as a family this time to the game engine, where they discover their fate and the fate of every other gaming icon character and games that will come well after them. Despite The Simpsons Hit and Run being a cultural milestone, or The Simpsons Arcade being the huge success it was, you have to wonder, where are they now? Are they lost in time to be forever frozen on the consoles they were intended for? The Simpsons Game makes you think about this, and it does it in the harshest kind of way. The Simpsons family discovers 8-bit versions of themselves, akin to those who were in the arcade game, being destroyed cartridge by cartridge, by the Sims creator and SimCity creator Will Wright. That's actually him, by the way. He voices his character. He kinda steals the show for a second. It's kind of amazing.
That's right, the nerdiest nerd in the computerverse.
Interestingly, Will explains that he's there to destroy the old, irrelevant version of these games because they're no longer needed and they mean nothing at this point to the company. So by simply destroying them and making room for the next big Simpsons game, and eventually the Simpsons that we're playing right now in this game will soon share their same fate. The same fate that went to Simpsons Hit and Run, wrestling, skateboarding, and every Simpsons incarnation before them. Why focus on what isn't relevant anymore? We need to focus on the future and focus on the next best thing. Visceral was out to make a point of preservation and therefore the lack of it in the gaming industry.
You can't do this!
Of course I can. I'm Will Wright, bitch.
Because we see it all the time. We see how games often become forgotten and aren't preserved in the way that they should be. Classics being forgotten by developers and fans having to make it loud and clear that they want them classics to remain alive and playable outside of emulation. Nintendo, for me personally, are the biggest culprit for this, leaving behind games of the past in previous consoles and only rarely porting them out of the blue sometimes. We're seeing classics like Wind Waker, Luigi's Mansion, Eternal Darkness begin to fall into obscurity and now come with a great cost of effort just to get your hands on them on the system that they should be intended for, and even then so, emulating them on PC or a system they shouldn't be allowed on. Remakes allow for these old games to come to the forefront and bring them a new sense of life. Resident Evil, Destroy All Humans, Spyro and Crash have all been given that modern paint job. Which is great for those games and the fans, but it begs the question, what happens to the original? As of this video, there is no modern way to get hold of the original Resident Evil trilogy, despite Director's Cut coming out on PlayStation Plus. Resident Evil 2 and 3 aren't available anywhere else. Whether this is because Capcom doesn't want to take the spotlight away from the incredible remakes, or just because Capcom see these now as obsolete. Whatever the reason may be, the fans know what they want and Capcom aren't listening. The Simpsons Game and Visceral dare to ask that same question. What happens once our characters too become obsolete? EA and Visceral over the years have made sure Dead Space remains playable for even the latest consoles. And now with a full remake under development under a new team, we get a full confirmation that EA and Visceral and the team behind Dead Space really care for the game's legacy and the preservation of those games as a whole, and that's important where it counts. And many companies are guilty for doing the complete opposite. Even during the development of the Simpsons game, there were many companies and gaming references that were seen too risky even for this game's commentary. And Visceral faced a lot of trouble and were asked to even remove some of the names and faces used in the game. And that makes you wonder how deep they was really going with this question and what fingers were being pointed and where.
Your creator is TV's most beloved animation visionary.
Seth MacFarlane?
I genuinely love this game. It's a game I often think about, and when it comes to Simpsons games as a whole, it's the one I always put on top of the list. This game doesn't choose to focus on the negatives of preservation or even the negatives of how game companies treat their franchises. It's a celebration of gaming as a whole, old and new, with full homages to modern games like Medal of Honor, Zelda, Grand Theft Auto, Okami, Pokemon, Guitar Hero, Final Fantasy and so many more. The Simpsons Game begs the industry as a whole to look at the games that made the foundation that we are now standing on and show them the complete respect they deserve. No matter how old, how modern or even how game changing, every game deserves a chance and every game deserves to be remembered. The Simpsons puts a pause on the rush of the limelight. It doesn't focus on the hit and run chasing the GTA trend, but instead it talks about what else is relevant around it, asking the players to look inwards and look at the industry and its history and break it down with an honest lens. The Simpsons Game doesn't break any barriers and it doesn't do anything fantastic that's really worth talking about other than its plot subject, and there's a lot here that's definitely worth remembering over time. And I wish it was that simple, and I wish I could say to you, go out there and just pick up the Simpsons Game on Xbox One X or even give it a go on PlayStation 4 or even PlayStation 5, but that's just not the case, and that's not what happened to the Simpsons Game.
Alright, loser.
The Simpsons Game is now a victim of its own message. It, much like the games before it, have been left behind. There is no digital way of downloading the game, the physical 360 version I'm playing isn't even backwards compatible for Xbox One or Series X or S. A game that wanted to battle the injustice of preservation of art and gaming for its story by pointing and directing fingers has now paid the price of time itself. Is this game a breakthrough or a milestone in Simpsons history, or even greater than hit and run in its legacy? Definitely not. But it stands on its own feet as an individual experience that has something worth saying and has a story worth seeing. Every time we see a remake, we always hear that same question. Is it needed? And there are two simple answers to that question. No, we do not need games recreated from the ground up to turn around and then sell for £70 just so they can make a profit off them all over again. The originals exist to be celebrated and admired by the generations to come and the generations that were able to experience them for the first time. But remakes allow for those same devs and those very same old fans to create a version that is new and fresh for them and allows brand new fans to come in and experience them for the first time, welcoming a whole entire new generation and fan base to keep the game alive. The second answer is yes. By creating these new versions and introducing new fans, they will be able to discover and embark and check out the original games if they care for them that much. Does Dead Space still hold up to date? Of course it does. Does The Last of Us need a remake 9 years later? No, it doesn't. But it's definitely worth trying out, and it's definitely worth allowing other people to discover the magic of these worlds and hopefully discover the art and where it all began with the originals. And by having these fans continue and these generations keeping these games alive as time goes on, we're able to see this art outlive us, and we're able to see it inspire an entire new set of game developers for the future. After the release of the Simpsons game in 2007, we actually saw the Simpsons arcade game was given a remaster and was able to get a second chance to be played by fans, including myself, in 2012. And we saw this get a release on Xbox Arcade and the PlayStation Network. And as of 2021, The Simpsons got an arcade cabinet for the 30th anniversary re-release. I'm not sure if this holds up or how it reviewed, but it's pretty cool that this game is still being remembered. I didn't make this video to go out my way to just talk about the Simpsons game or even recommend it. I don't care if you play it or not, but I wanted to show you that sometimes you have to say something about the art and the games that you love. And sometimes using your artistic platform can have positive effects. Don't be afraid to point out the flaws of an industry that you love so much and something you enjoy being a part of. Visceral was able to see that gaming preservation wasn't taken as serious as it needed to be, and video games weren't being seen as art. So by humanizing these characters and creating a story that points a finger at the people responsible, it may have had a knock-on effect to why fans like me in 2012 was able to replay a game that came out in 1991. This video isn't a cry for help about the Simpsons game to make sure it's remembered, but it's about making sure that the game itself is never forgotten. You probably have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm talking to you, Ralph. Yep.
Wow!
There's an audience. Say hi, YouTube. Thank you for watching the video. See you at the next checkpoints. Bye.
Daddy, someone's looking at me.